Welcome to Health Crave, everyone. I'm Heather Cross, and I'm here with Mike Henry.
Hey, everyone.
And on Health Crave, we cut through all that confusing stuff you hear about health and nutrition and get straight to what matters most
To you.
to you. So today, we're diving into a phrase that's thrown around all the time, and I think a lot of people just kind of accept it as fact. A calorie is a calorie.
Yeah, calorie is a calorie, right?
Right. But as we've been researching for this deep dive, it turns out that the science tells a different story, doesn't it, Mike?
It really does. On the surface, that phrase seems pretty simple, right? Like a calorie represents a unit of energy. So if you eat 100 calories of broccoli or 100 calories of, I don't know, a donut, it should have the same effect on your body in terms of energy.
Right. It should all just even out in the end.
Yeah, but it turns out that it's way more complex than that. We're not just simple machines that burn fuel like a car.
Yeah, not all calories are created equal.
Right. Different foods interact with our bodies in really different ways,
Right.
and that could have a huge impact on how we process those calories, how they affect our hormones, how hungry we feel after eating.
Exactly. We're going to be unpacking all of this in this deep dive using a whole bunch of different research and insights from nutrition experts. We'll talk about how different foods are processed in your body, the role of your hormones, and some practical takeaways for making healthier choices.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting stuff to share with you guys today, so buckle up.
So, Mike, let's kick things off with this whole concept of a calorie is a calorie. I mean, it sounds logical on the surface. Energy is energy, right?
Yeah, that's the classic understanding. A calorie is just a unit of energy. So theoretically, whether that energy comes from a carrot or a cookie, it should have the same impact on your weight.
But we know that's not the whole story. I mean, we all know from personal experience that different foods make us feel differently, right? You don't feel the same after eating a salad as you do after, that donut we were talking about.
Totally. Think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how you feel after eating a big protein-rich meal, like, chicken breast or salmon with some veggies? Compare that to how you feel after a bag of chips or a candy bar.
Oh, completely different. After a protein meal, I feel satisfied, full, energized.
Right, exactly. But after that, after those chips or candy, you get that quick burst of energy,
Yeah.
but then it crashes.
And you're hungry again.
Right, and that's your body telling you something. Even if the calorie count is similar, those foods are being processed differently in your body.
So what's actually happening there on a biological level?
Well, let's take a closer look at one example, and that's the difference between fructose and glucose. Now, both of these are sugars. Both provide the same number of calories per gram,
Okay.
but your body metabolizes them in very different ways. Glucose, your body can use glucose for energy.
Okay.
All of your tissues can use glucose. But fructose, primarily your liver handles fructose.
So our bodies treat these two types of sugar very differently, even though they have the same calorie count. So what does that mean for us in practical terms? How does that difference actually play out?
So here's the thing. Fructose, research has shown that fructose actually triggers the release of more of the hunger hormone ghrelin compared to glucose.
Oh, interesting.
So you can eat the same number of calories, but if those calories come from fructose, you might end up feeling hungrier sooner
Wow.
because your body's pumping out more of that hunger hormone.
So it's not just about willpower. Our hormones are actually playing a role here in how satisfied we feel after eating.
Right. It's not just in your head.
Yeah.
There's a biological reason for it, and there's more. Fructose also doesn't seem to stimulate those satiety centers in your brain.
Those fullness signals.
Yeah, the fullness signals, as effectively as glucose does. It's like your brain isn't getting the message that you're full.
So even if you've consumed enough calories, your brain might not be registering it.
Exactly. And on top of that, excessive fructose intake has been linked to a whole cascade of not-so-great effects.
Like what?
Insulin resistance, that stubborn belly fat that's hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
Increased triglycerides, those are unhealthy blood fats.
Right.
Higher blood sugar levels, and even those small, dense LDL cholesterol particles, which are the bad kind of cholesterol.
So not just about weight gain, but a whole range of potential health issues.
Right, exactly. And the interesting thing is that the same amount of calories from glucose doesn't typically have these same negative effects. So it really highlights how the type of calorie, the source of that calorie, can make a big difference.
Okay, so we've got to pay attention to where those calories are coming from, not just the number itself. Now, we've been talking a lot about sugar here. What about fruit? Fruit has fructose, but we're always told to eat more fruit.
That's a great point, Heather. And it's important to clarify, fruit does contain fructose, but it also comes packed with a whole bunch of other good stuff. fiber, vitamins, minerals, and water. Those components actually help to slow down the absorption of fructose and mitigate those potentially negative effects we talked about. So it's really those concentrated sources of added sugars in processed foods that we want to be mindful of.
Okay, so it's not about demonizing all sugar, but being smart about the types and sources we choose.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen that the source of the calorie can have a big impact. Now, I want to talk about something else that I found fascinating in our research for this deep dive, the thermic effect of food, or TF. Can you explain what that is, Mike?
So the thermic effect of food, or TF, is essentially the energy that your body uses to digest, absorb, and metabolize the food you eat.
Okay,
It's like a metabolic tax on the food you consume.
interesting.
And here's the key takeaway. The amount of energy your body uses, it varies depending on whether you're eating protein, carbs, or fats.
So some foods require more energy to process than others?
Exactly. Fat has the lowest PF, only about 2 to 3%.
Okay.
Carbs come in a bit higher at 6 to 8%.
Yeah.
But protein has the highest TEF, a whopping 25 to 30%.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is. So if you eat 100 calories of protein, your body might only be able to use around 70 to 75 of those calories because it burned the rest just digesting it. But with fat, almost all of those 100 calories are available to be used or stored.
So even though we're talking about the same number of calories, the net impact on our bodies can be very different depending on what we're eating.
Right, precisely.
Okay, so understanding TEF really adds another layer to this whole calorie equation.
It really does. And it helps to explain why diets that are higher in protein can sometimes be more effective for weight loss, even when the total calorie intake is similar to other diets.
Because your body is naturally burning more calories just processing that protein.
Yeah, exactly. It's a subtle but significant advantage.
That's so interesting. So protein is clearly playing a starring role here. It's not only got this higher TEF, but it also affects how full we feel, right? We were talking about this earlier.
Absolutely. Protein is incredibly satiating. It helps us feel fuller for longer compared to carbohydrates and fats.
Yeah.
So it can naturally lead to us eating fewer calories overall without having to meticulously track and restrict everything.
Right, it's like a built-in appetite control.
Yeah, kind of. And there's been a ton of research on this. One study found that people who increased their protein intake to about 30% of their daily calories ended up eating an average of 441 fewer calories per day without even consciously trying to cut back.
441, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. And they lost about 11 pounds over 12 weeks in that study.
That's huge. And they weren't even actively trying to restrict their calories.
Right. Just by prioritizing protein, they naturally felt less hungry and ate less overall.
That's such a powerful takeaway.
It is.
So we've got this concept of protein being really filling and helping us manage our calorie intake naturally. What about the satiety index? How does that fit into all of this?
So the satiety index, it basically ranks different foods based on how full they make you feel.
Oh, I've seen that.
How long they keep you satisfied.
Yeah.
And it tries to put a number on that feeling of fullness. Some foods, like you were saying earlier, Heather, some foods keep you feeling full for hours, while others you can just gobble down and still feel hungry.
Exactly. I know I can easily polish off a whole bag of chips and still want more.
Yeah,
Yep.
chips are definitely low on the satiety index.
But then, like, a couple of eggs for breakfast, and I'm good for hours.
Right. Eggs are high on the satiety index. Other foods that score high are things like boiled potatoes, beef, beans, and a lot of fruits.
Okay, good to know.
These foods are really effective at reducing hunger. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got things like donuts, cakes, pastries. They score really low.
So those foods are not going to help you manage your hunger, even if they have the same number of calories as a more satiating option.
Right. So by choosing foods that are higher on the satiety index, you can make a big difference in your long-term energy balance.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about another popular diet approach. Low-carb diets. How does the whole calorie is a calorie thing hold up when we look at those?
So this is where it gets really interesting. A lot of studies have shown that low-carb diets often lead to greater weight loss compared to low-fat diets, even when the calorie intake is similar between the groups.
Really? So even if people are eating the same number of calories,
Yeah,
the low-carb group tends to lose more weight.
that's what the research suggests, yeah. And this tells us that there's something else going on besides just calorie counting.
So what's the explanation for that?
Well, it seems that one of the key reasons is that drastically reducing your carbohydrate intake can have a big impact on your appetite.
Okay.
Often people on low-carb diets just naturally feel less hungry and end up eating fewer calories without actively trying to restrict.
I've heard people say that about low-carb diets. They're not as hungry, so they naturally eat less.
Right, exactly. Plus, there's often an initial loss of water weight on low-carb diets, which can also contribute to those early results.
Right, that can be motivating for people to stick with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And as we talked about earlier, low-carb diets are often naturally higher in protein, which has its own benefits for satiety and metabolism.
So it seems like the shift in macronutrient ratios, more protein, fewer carbs, is playing a big role in how these diets affect appetite and weight loss.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's talk about a specific type of carb that gets a lot of attention: refined carbohydrates. And this brings us to the glycemic index, or GI. Can you explain what that is and why it matters?
Sure. So there's a pretty strong consensus in nutrition that refined carbs, things like added sugars, white bread, pastries, are generally not the healthiest choices.
Yeah, we all know those aren't the best for us.
Right. One of the main issues with refined carbs is how they affect your blood sugar levels.
That's the blood sugar roller coaster, right? You
Yep.
get that spike and then it crashes and you're left feeling tired and craving more sugar. I've been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. So refined carbs, they're typically low in fiber, which means they're digested and absorbed very quickly. And that causes those rapid spikes in blood sugar.
And that's what the glycemic index measures.
Exactly. The GI measures how quickly different foods raise blood sugar levels. High GI foods cause a rapid spike, followed by a sharp drop.
And that's what makes you feel terrible.
Exactly. And then you're hungry again, and you crave more sugary stuff, so it's a vicious cycle.
Right. It's like you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, it can be tough to break out of that cycle. Studies have shown that people actually tend to eat more calories after consuming high GI meals compared to low GI meals.
Really. So even if you start with the same number of calories, the high GI food might make you eat more later on.
Yeah, it's like those refined carbs trigger a cascade of effects that make it harder to regulate your appetite.
So what can people do to manage this?
Well, choosing whole, unprocessed carbohydrate sources that are rich in fiber can make a big difference.
Okay, so like brown rice instead of white rice.
Right. Whole wheat bread instead of white bread.
Got it.
Sweet potatoes instead of, French fries.
Right. Those kinds of swaps.
Exactly. The fiber in those whole foods helps to slow down that glucose release so you don't get that rapid spike and crash. You get more stable blood sugar levels, and you feel fuller for longer.
So it's about making smarter choices even within the same food groups.
Absolutely. Now, we can't talk about calories without addressing the classic concept of calories in, calories out, or CICO.
Right. That's the basic principle behind weight loss, right?
Yeah, the idea is that if you consume fewer calories than you burn, you'll lose weight.
Eat less, move more.
Right. But this is where the role of hormones comes in, and it gets a lot more complex.
Because it's not just a simple math equation, is it?
Not at all. While the fundamental principle of CICO, that energy imbalance over time will lead to weight change, it's true. The idea that it's just about consciously restricting calories and increasing exercise is a massive oversimplification.
It's way more nuanced than that.
It really is. It ignores the incredible complexity of our internal systems that regulate energy balance, and hormones play a huge role in that.
So our hormones can actually affect how our bodies use and store those calories, making that simple in and out equation less straightforward.
Exactly. When we're talking about calories in, hormones influence things like our appetite and cravings, and how full we feel after eating. And on the calories outside, hormones affect our metabolic rate, how efficiently we burn those calories for energy, and even how our body stores fat.
So it's like those hormones can be working against us even if we're diligently counting calories.
Absolutely. And hormonal imbalances can make this even more challenging. Things like insulin resistance, PCOS, thyroid issues, or imbalances in hunger and satiety hormones like leptin and ghrelin can really throw a wrench in the works.
So it's not just about willpower or discipline. There could be underlying hormonal factors that make it really difficult to lose weight, even if someone is trying their best to follow the CICO principle.
Right. And those hormonal imbalances can make it even harder to stick to a calorie deficit because they affect how hungry we feel, how satisfied we feel after eating, and how our body uses those calories.
So let's break down some of these hormonal players and how they can impact weight management. We touched on insulin earlier. Can you remind us how chronically high insulin can affect things?
Sure. So when your insulin levels are consistently elevated, which often happens when you eat a diet high in refined carbohydrates and sugars, your body becomes very efficient at storing fat.
Okay.
And it can also become less effective at burning stored fat for energy. So even if your overall calorie intake isn't super high, that hormonal environment created by high insulin can make it really difficult to lose weight.
So even if you're technically in a calorie deficit, your hormones might be preventing you from tapping into those fat stores.
Exactly. Now, another important pair of hormones we need to talk about are leptin and ghrelin. These are your hunger and fullness signals.
Right, I've heard about those.
Leptin, it's produced by your fat cells, and it's supposed to signal to your brain that you're full.
Okay.
But unfortunately, with weight gain, people can develop leptin resistance.
So their brain stops getting the message that they're full.
Right, so they keep eating even though they've technically consumed enough calories.
Wow, that makes it so much harder to manage your weight.
It really does. And then you have ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and levels of ghrelin go up when you restrict calories, especially when you severely restrict calories.
So your body is basically fighting back against that calorie deficit by making you feel more hungry.
Exactly. It's a survival mechanism.
Makes sense.
Your body wants to maintain a stable weight, so when it senses a shortage of energy coming in, it tries to compensate.
Wow, so we're up against our own biology here when we try to restrict calories too much.
We are. And then we can't forget about cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right, because stress can definitely affect our eating habits.
Absolutely. And when cortisol levels are chronically elevated, which happens to a lot of us in our modern busy lives, it can increase appetite, particularly for those high-calorie, comforting foods.
Oh, that's so true. When I'm stressed, I just want to eat all the carbs.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's a natural response, but unfortunately this can lead to weight gain, particularly around the abdomen.
And we haven't even touched on hormones like estrogen and thyroid hormones, which I know can be really important for women especially.
You're absolutely right, Heather. Thyroid hormones are crucial for regulating metabolic rate, how efficiently your body burns calories for energy. So if your thyroid is underactive, your metabolism can slow down, and you might find it harder to lose weight even if you haven't changed your eating habits.
Okay.
And for women, fluctuations in estrogen levels throughout their lives can also affect how they gain and lose weight.
So the takeaway here is that hormones play a huge role in our weight and how our bodies handle calories. It's definitely not as simple as just counting numbers. And I think this is especially important for women to understand because that standard eat less, move more advice can sometimes backfire.
Yeah, that can be a really frustrating message for women, especially when they're struggling with hormonal imbalances. Drastically cutting calories and pushing for intense exercise can actually make things worse.
How so?
Well, severe calorie restriction can actually lower thyroid hormone levels, which, as we discussed, can slow down metabolism.
Right.
It can also significantly increase cortisol, that stress hormone, leading to more belly fat, anxiety, sleep problems. And the body might actually hold on to weight as a protective mechanism when it senses that it's not getting enough fuel.
So they're doing what they think is right.
Right. They're trying to follow the advice,
Yeah.
but it's actually working against their body's natural processes.
Wow. So that well-intentioned advice to eat less, move more could be doing more harm than good for some people.
It definitely can, especially for women dealing with hormonal imbalances. So what's the alternative?
Right. What can people do instead?
Instead of focusing on deprivation, drastically cutting calories, it's much more effective to focus on nourishing your body with nutrient-dense foods.
Okay.
Foods that support your hormones and help you feel naturally satisfied.
So what does that look like in practical terms? What are some things people can focus on?
Well, prioritizing protein and fiber at meals can make a huge difference.
Right. We've talked about those benefits.
Exactly. They help you feel full and keep your blood sugar levels stable.
Okay. What else?
Being mindful of meal timing can also be really helpful.
Okay. Like not skipping meals.
Right. Not skipping meals, trying to eat at regular intervals,
Yeah.
and managing stress through things like mindfulness, adequate sleep, and gentle movement that doesn't overstress the body.
Right. It's about taking care of yourself holistically.
Exactly. It's about supporting those natural hormonal rhythms rather than fighting against them with these extreme measures.
So if you've been struggling with just counting calories and not seeing the results you want, or if you're feeling frustrated by the eat less, move more mantra, remember that there's a much bigger picture at play here.
There really is.
Pay attention to the types of foods you're eating, prioritize the ones that support your hormones and help you feel full and satisfied. Manage your stress levels, get enough sleep. These are all powerful tools that can make a huge difference.
It's about making sustainable lifestyle changes that support your overall health and well-being.
Rather than chasing those quick fixes through extreme measures.
Exactly.
Well, Mike, this has been such a fascinating and insightful conversation.
I agree, Heather.
It's clear that when it comes to our bodies and how we process calories, there's a lot more going on than just simple math.
Absolutely.
And for you listening, if you found this deep dive into calories valuable, we'd love for you to follow us on Instagram at healthcrave.site, subscribe and like our YouTube channel, and follow us on Spotify and rate us 5 stars. We are committed to bringing you the knowledge to live your healthiest life.
We'll see you next time.